This is Maria Nason, and she's a senior at Wellesley College, and she'll be answering a few questions today about Sweden and women's role in Sweden. So, Maria, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your relation to Sweden?
Sure. I was actually born in Sweden, in northern Sweden, in a very small town with a small city, 50,000 people. So I lived there until I was 18 years old when I came here to the U.S. to go to Wellesley College.
Sweden is known for their high level of equality in the workforce, of gender equality in the workforce and in public positions. What is your opinion about this?
Well, it's absolutely true. They actually have pretty strict quotas of how to fill their management positions, and companies are constantly evaluated on how gender equal they are. Government is very strict about employing just as many women as men in political positions. So it was a given growing up that women would have equal opportunities for high-level positions.
At the same time, much of the research that we've done has pointed out that Sweden's social system is still extremely patriarchal. Do you agree with this?
No, I really don't. I mean, Sweden is very good about self-criticism, so research published by Swedish scholars is going to be critical of the system, naturally. And growing up in Sweden, a lot of times people are pointing out how unequal it is and whatnot. But after having lived here in the U.S. for 4 years and seeing what it's like here and doing studies of other places in the world, I know that when compared to an international setting, Sweden is practically perfectly equal. And it's only when you hold Sweden to the standard of itself as compared to other countries that certainly there is always room for improvement. And I think it's a good thing that Sweden recognizes that room for improvement. But it's also important to realize that on a global scale, Sweden is way more equal than any other place I've seen.
Do you think there's a difference in the way that Swedish women are treated compared to American women in both the home and at work?
Well, I haven't had much experience with the workforce here in the United States, so my personal experience is only from articles that I've read in news casts and whatnot. And I know that Swedish women have a lot more independence than American women, generally speaking. Financial independence, social independence. They are in no way relying on men in anything. Just a simple thing like when you go on a date, even young people, you would never, ever assume that the guy is going to pay for dinner. In fact, that would almost be an insult if guys tried to pay, even if just for a cup of coffee. You split it completely, and you don't necessarily split it 50-50, but each person buys what they get, and that's pretty much how it works. So that was a big culture difference when I came here to the U.S. and went on my first date. I was very confused by that. But that's just an example and a reflection of how the system really works for women and how women have taken charge of that independence and are acting it out every day. So I think that's a difference between women in the two countries. Then, of course, in the social setting, you will have to look hard to find a woman that's staying home, taking care of children in Sweden. And at Wellesley, of course, we have a bit of a skewed environment around us. There are a lot of homemaker mothers. And that's not necessarily a reflection of all of the United States. In Sweden, even higher income families, both parents will be working. It's very, very rare to find a woman who is not in the labor force.
Do you think that children have a different position in Swedish society as well?
Well, Sweden's children are, I think, given a larger voice. Parents can't hit their children at all. That's terribly illegal, and unfortunately, maybe children are very aware of this, so they have potentially maybe a bit more power than is necessarily good for them. They are taught at a very young age that they have independence and they have the authority to tell the government if anything's not right in their family. That being said, of course, children are children, and they can get abused and they can get oppressed just like anywhere.
How would you describe government efforts and policies aimed towards improving gender equality in Sweden?
Well, they actually have a very unique position, which is the Minister of Equality. Such as it's a cabinet member in the government that is specifically for gender equality and equality between ages and essentially all factors of equality. And from what I understand, it's working really well. There's very little, that they can actually improve on, but they are working very hard to constantly remind themselves to strive towards perfect equality. And they are in no means settling just because, women are making 98 cents for every $1 of males. They're still pushing for those extra cents to become perfectly equal. So women's movements are extremely strong in Sweden as well.
Do you think that your experience in Sweden has shaped or changed your own personal values or your own motivations here at Wellesley?
Well, I think I'm a very independent person. I don't ever assume that anybody is going to take care of me. And I'm willing to work hard to make sure that I provide a life for me, because part of being in Sweden is that sense that even as a young person, you don't rely on your parents. And that's probably true for a lot of people in the United States as well. It's just not necessarily true for everybody at Wellesley. So the fact that your parents would provide you with a credit card is just completely unheard of where I come from.
Did you grow up with any strong female role models in Sweden?
Yeah, the concept of equality is relatively old in Sweden. It's actually existed for a pretty long time. So there are plenty of role models in various companies, and even in the small community that I grew up in, the various leaders, political leaders, would be women. That doesn't necessarily mean they're good, but they're still women. And my mother was very, very helpful as well.
And one last question. Do you think that there are any gendered political issues in Sweden, such as domestic violence or reproductive rights, that are making the news and current events right now?
Well, Sweden isn't a religious country per se, so this idea of disputing abortion is just not heard of. Abortion is completely legal, period. There's no discussion about it. And in terms of stem cell research and other such moral issues, it's also pretty much free flow. So on the values-based issues that take a lot of attention here in the United States, those are barely heard of in Sweden. It's just because they're not important. Well, they're important, but they don't become issues. That being said, women are by genetics a lot of times smaller than men, and the general tendencies of emotional traits and whatnot are prevalent in women everywhere. So certainly things like domestic violence exist, psychological oppression of women's and whatnot, and you'll read about such cases in Sweden as well as in any place. But it's not like it's an issue. It's not like it's something that the government needs to take extreme measures to combat, because it's a factor of life, really.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time, Maria.
You're welcome. Hope a little helpful.
Oh, I think you have been. Thank you so much.
All right.